We're going to do, Drew, we're going to jump into the schedule for the Jets. Wanted your opinion on some of the AFC East teams. And obviously, we share a lot of similar opponents this year, so we can dive into that. A really fun storyline to start with, guys. The Jets get Carolina in week 1. Sam Darnold in Carolina against Zach Wilson. I tweeted out yesterday before anything was leaked, I can't wait for the Jets to lose against Carolina in week 1, to be told we made a mistake trading away Sam Darnold, that Zach Wilson was a bad decision. They should have taken Justin Fields. It wrote itself. Then sure enough, 5 hours later, I think Brian Cos came out and said that the Jets had Carolina in week 1. Clay, huge storyline for this franchise. It's a game I want to win so badly just because I don't want the national media on our back. Do you think the Jets win week 1 against Carolina and Sam Darnold?
Yeah. And what kind of fan am I if I say no? No, I really do think they can win this game. Yeah, they're actually coming in at, I believe, 5.5-point underdogs. We're 4 months out, and they're already 5.5-point underdogs, which isn't a great sign. But like I said, I just trust this team. I trust the coaching staff. Granted, we need to be healthy. Quinn Williams actually needs to come back healthy from his injury. We don't know what he's going to look like, but I think he can terrorize that interior line. They didn't really do much to help that interior line. I think they can win this game, and like you said, like it shouldn't matter if they lose it because it's not Zach Wilson. As much as the headlines are going to say Zach Wilson against Sam Darnold, it's not what it is. Like, just if they lose, it doesn't mean Zach Wilson's the next Sam Darnold, and they're going to have to trade him away in 3 years. Like, I don't think that's the case. So I am confident. I do think they can win this game. I did pick the over when we just went over their lines a few minutes ago, and I think this is one of the games that they take away.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the Jets are going to win this game. There's one thing I know for sure. Jets rookie head coaches and quarterbacks win in week 1. Sam Darnold won by 35 points on Monday Night Football and then went 12-35 the rest of his tenure here. So can see the Jets winning really quickly. Drew, win or loss for the Jets in week 1?
I feel like rookie quarterbacks, for you guys as a franchise, do well. Rookie quarterbacks on the whole, when you look at the way that they trend in the NFL, week 1 and week 2 are sometimes often their best weeks, typically because there's no tape. There's no tape for coordinators to really – I mean, when you're game planning for a rookie quarterback, it's why Bill Belichick is so good at it. It's why his winning record against rookies is so astounding. Because as soon as you get a couple games of tape, you can identify what their strengths and weaknesses are. And unfortunately, because they're rookies, they don't have the ability to quickly pivot their game to doing something different than what they're comfortable with. You know, you saw that. You've seen it with Josh Allen. Just think back of all the rookie quarterbacks Bill Belichick has steamrolled over the years. That's how he's done it. Is he takes away your strength and says, "I'm going to leave this other thing wide open." I just don't think that at this stage of your development you can go get that you can go do these things. With you guys playing this team with no tape, they have no idea. None of us know what Zach Wilson is, and that's almost to Carolina's detriment. They don't know how to prepare for this. Meanwhile, the Jets very much know how to. There's enough tape on Sam Darnold out there. You can kind of see what his strengths and weaknesses are. Now, whether they can make good on those, I don't know. But Carolina doesn't seem like a strong team to me this year. I mean, I think Vegas has them listed as the third. I think they're close, either third or fourth with Atlanta as far as where they're going to finish in the NFC South this year. So with that in mind, I'm really not afraid of them. And I think that if Robert Saleh can come in and have the energizing effect that you guys are hoping he has, that it sounds like he's already had with some of the players, I don't see any reason why the Jets can't win this game.
Okay, so that was Carolina, and you mentioned Bill Belichick and how difficult it is to face him as a rookie quarterback and his record against them. That's who the Jets have for their home opener in week 2. Wanted to ask you quickly, Drew, number one, do you think that the Patriots are the second best team in this division? And secondly, do you think this is going to be a bit of a blowout to the Patriots with what we just talked about?
I don't. And here's why. The Patriots spent a lot of money in free agency. They did a lot of things, which is unorthodox if you think about how the Patriots have conducted business. The Patriots are a team that have gotten by for 20-something years with a Hall of Fame quarterback, being able to cover up for a lot of the warts on their roster. And last year when they lost that, you saw all of that laid bare. Okay, that came to the forefront like, oh, wait a minute. obviously they were missing some pieces. Donta Hightower, Patrick Chung. Those guys aren't nobodies. I think they each have multiple Super Bowls with the Patriots. Mm-hmm. But with that in mind, the Patriots, it all comes down to you're going to put these guys on the field, but what does your offense look like? You have no wide receiver talent, but you never did. Tom Brady just played so well that he could get production out of them. Cam Newton cannot. He illustrated that painfully last year. So if your idea is that you're going to trot out Cam Newton and let Mac Jones marinate on the bench, which is probably where he belongs. I mean, I say that as an Alabama fan. Mac Jones needs to sit for a hot minute. Then you're going out there with a quarterback who's not really that much of an aerial threat. They did spend a lot of money on tight ends, but at the same time, you guys have some decent safeties. I mean, you guys are going to have decent safety play. You have a good defensive line. You can mitigate some of what they do, and the rushing attack is what's supposed to carry them, but you guys have a front seven that's built to kind of mitigate that. And it was former Alabama player Quinn Williams, who I am still just in love with. I mean, I hate the fact that between the Dolphins and the Jets, you guys get most of the good Alabama players and we get the ones who suck. But with that said, I think that that's a closer game than people are giving it credit for. Do I think you guys will win? It's hard because Bill Belichick is one of the great coaches, and you're starting a rookie quarterback against a guy who has predominantly steamrolled rookies. But I think in terms of the roster quality, they spent a ton of money. Who knows how long that takes to acclimate? Who knows if Cam Newton, does he get better? Or is this just do we get to watch another year of his slow descent into hell? I think ultimately that game's a lot closer than it looks on paper right now.
Clay, you had the Jets starting 1-0. Are they 2-0 heading into week 3?
I'm going to say no. I want to give them a win against the Patriots, especially on my birthday weekend. I think they lose a game like he mentioned, and we've been talking about it for a while. Bill Belichick is he's just amazing, especially against rookie quarterbacks. And I just don't know if the offense can do enough against that defense because they are getting a lot of guys back. We mentioned it earlier, and Drew just mentioned it. They're getting a lot of guys back.
I actually have his record. It's 21-6 against rookies.
What is it?
21-6.
Yeah, I think we can count that as 22-6. In my opinion, I think he'll go. They'll win this game. I'm not going to say handedly. I think it'll be a close game because I think we do match up with them well, especially our defense and their offense. We don't have great receivers. We don't have great corners. They don't have great receivers. They have good tight ends. We have good safeties, and we just drafted a couple linebacker safeties that I think were brought in to cover said tight ends.
Yeah.
And obviously we're getting C.J. Mosley back. We have a good defensive line. They have a good offensive line. I think we can kind of just cancel each other out where I think we match up with them pretty well on offense. I think it's just that their defense is going to not overpower our offense, but kind of just take more control.
Yeah, I agree. I think Bill Belichick is the tiebreaker there. So I have the Jets 1-1 as well. I think he'll make Wilson throw a lot over the middle of the field, which is something he didn't do a ton at BYU. They may play 2 high safeties and really force him to play in between the hashes. So let's say 1-1. I'm going to put the next 3 games together, gentlemen, just because they're out of division games. So we're at Denver versus Tennessee at MetLife, and then at Atlanta in London, which is a Woody Johnson special for sure. I'm going to say the Jets go 2-1 in this span. I see them losing against Denver primarily because their defense is really good, but I think they have too many offensive weapons for our back 6 or 7. And then I see them winning against Tennessee and Atlanta. Clay, we just touched on Tennessee. I think they're a team that's going to be in decline this year, especially on the offensive side of the ball, losing the OC, losing a couple of wide receivers. And I think we win in Atlanta, played really well in London 3 or 4 years ago against Miami. So I have them going 2-1 in this stretch. Clay, first of all, what says you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you. I wanted to give them the win over Denver, but I do think Denver's defense is pretty good. Their secondary is good. They just added a couple big pieces. And, I think, don't get me wrong, again, I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Denver takes that one. And then we're going to beat the team that lost Arthur Smith and beat the team that got Arthur Smith. I think we're gonna show him why he wanted to come here and we just didn't want him. So yeah. I think the Titans, they're gonna struggle a little more this year than they have in the last 2. I think we take that one at home, and then going out to London. Thankfully, I didn't want to see them in London, but thankfully it's not a home game for us. It's an away game. So we kind of have an advantage in that sense. So we have 9 home games, 6 away games, and then 1 neutral. So it kind of works in our benefit a little bit. And so I think we kind of like Woody goes back to his 4-year home and gets the W.
Drew, I got a question for you. I think you only play one of those 3 teams this year, being Atlanta. But out of Denver, Tennessee, and Atlanta, which 3 of those teams do you think is the most dangerous and can potentially make the playoffs this year?
So we play Tennessee and we play Atlanta. We play both of them. And it's really hard because you have 2 dramatically different teams. I mean, in Tennessee, and both of them are undergoing a ton of turnover, right? You've got Atlanta that's in the middle of – Atlanta's in that place no team wants to be in, where you're old, you're really old, and you're really young. And you don't have a whole lot in the middle. And you're trying to rebuild the team, but you don't want to get rid of your aging quarterback, or you couldn't. I mean, I don't know what efforts were made to shop him, but there was rumors about it. So you don't really know what there was going on there or what they're going to be this year. It's like when you're growing a beard and you're in that weird in-between phase where it hasn't quite become a full beard, but it's more than stubble, and it just kind of makes you look homeless. That's the Atlanta Falcons as a football team. And so in that way, they don't scare me at all. Tennessee is interesting because Tennessee is the team. I mean, you guys signed Corey Davis, which you stole that weapon from them. When you look at their roster from last year, they lost, their number 2 receiver in targets, their number 3 in Jonnu Smith. Adam Humphries was their 4th, and Khalif Raymond was their 5th. So they've lost most of their targets from an offense that wasn't really built around the pass, but needed guys who could play off play action well. Guys with big catch radiuses, guys who were physical down the field, because that's what their offense was predicated on. Now you've lost that. You're going to try to replace it in a single offseason with some kind of ad hoc free agents and some rookies. I just think their offense now only has one real weapon, and that's Derrick Henry. And that makes them, like you saw in the playoff game where they lost to the Ravens, the second that Corey Davis exited that game, their offense ground to a halt. They had nothing. They become very easy to defend because if you can double A.J. Brown, they don't have any pop. In that way, their team doesn't scare me at all. I think they're the weakest of that group.
Yeah,
and
I really agree with that.
Sorry, Luke. I just want to mention the receivers and we were talking about it earlier, and you kind of just alluded how they just lost all of their top receivers except for A.J. Brown. I'm looking at the depth chart on our lads. Their left receiver is Nick Westbrook Ikin. I don't even know who that is. I've never heard that name. And then the slot receiver is Josh Reynolds, who they got over from Los Angeles, and I think he'll be.
They have a whole group of names that aren't. They have a whole group of names that aren't established, and that's the downfall for the Titans this year. Is that when they made their AFC Championship run, they did it on the back of ridiculous defensive performances and running the ball down people's throats while lulling them to sleep with that play act. You know what I mean? Like they lull you to sleep with the run that you have no choice but to sell out for. And then they play action you to death. When that dried up on them this past season, they had nothing. And then it looks like it's only going to get worse from here because they're not getting any better. And Ryan Tannehill, when you ask him to be a stand in the pocket, scan the field, stand there for 3.5 seconds, buy a little time with your legs and deliver downfield, he's failed as a quarterback. He's only really had NFL success running this play-action heavy offense and 1 year of play-action heavy offense under Adam Gase in Miami. So in that way, I just feel like they're set up for failure this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. The Jets obviously have the bye early in the season after their trip to London, so they have the bye in week 6. Then they have fantastically 12 games straight in a row with the Thursday night football in there. So there is an extended weekend where they'll have 10 or 12 days in between games. But after the bye, they then go to New England. We already touched on the matchup. I'm going to chalk that up as a loss. Clay, are you in agreement there?
Yeah, I think they go 0-2 against New England this year.
Okay, we won't go any further on that one. Weeks 8 and 9 are against non-divisional opponents again. We play Cincinnati at home, which is a game I think we're going to win. We touched on the receiving core in Cincinnati, but the rest of their roster just isn't good enough to me. Their offensive line is going to have trouble with our front seven, particularly our front four. I think they're going to eat against Joe Burrow and that offensive line, and their secondary may have difficulty matching up to our guys with Corey Davis, Crowder, Elijah Moore, and Denzel Mims and co there. So I'm giving us a win against Cincinnati. And then in Indianapolis, the Colts, we play on Thursday Night Football in their building in Indy. That's going to be a tough one, Clay.
Yeah, I'm in agreement again. So far, we're eight games in, and we're 8 for 8 in agreement. So, yeah, New England, yeah, they're going to lose. I think they're going to lose that game again. Cincinnati, and you did mention that their secondary might struggle with our weapons. I think our secondary is going to struggle with their weapons. They already had T. Higgins, they already had Tyler Boyd, and now they're bringing in Jamar Chase. They have Joe Mixon out of the backfield. We're hoping, as a fan of Joe Burrow, I'm hoping he gets back to what he was. So that offense does have a lot of firepower, but I'm confident that the defense will get to Burrow and get in his face, and it won't matter how good your receivers are because he's just not going to have enough time to throw. That's what my hope is. And by that time, we should have a more than healthy Quinn Williams, especially with his foot. And we don't have that other edge rusher opposite Carl Lawson, and I'm still okay. And I think Vinny Curry, a rotation of Vinny Curry, John Franklin Myers, and I'm still holding out hope for my Gator, Jabari Zuniga. So I think that we'll be okay on the other defensive end position, and I think that defensive front is just going to cause enough havoc to Joe Burrow to where we can actually win that game. And then that last game, who was it? Indianapolis on Thursday night, the home team more often than not wins on Thursday night, and the Colts are just a better football team. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that. I think the Colts win that game, and it actually might be, Gier's got something.
Do we know that they're a better football team
than the Jets? I think so.
But hear me out on this. Now, I saw some Bills fans in the run-up to the schedule release talking about how they wanted Indy on primetime early in the season would be a rubber match of the wild card game that was so close. Like it would make for good headlines. It would be a great pick for a primetime game. And my response to all of them was, don't get your hopes up, because I don't think I think the league likes the Colts, but I don't see them throwing them into the fire in terms of primetime games against teams that are on the upswing early in the season. And here's why. I don't know what they are, and I don't think they know what they are. You traded for a quarterback that you hope Frank Reich can kind of bring back to prominence. That's what led to the acquisition of Jesus Christ. Now his name. Yeah. So they go out and they get this quarterback. And then you look at their offensive line and you go, well, who's your left tackle? Well, you signed a guy an NFL level starter who won't be available for the first month of football. So there's that. You don't know who your left tackle is going to the start of a season for a quarterback who just came off a year where he was the most sacked quarterback in football. You don't know whether or not the changes in your skill position group are really going to hurt you. You don't know what their front seven is going to look like. A lot of their success, go back to the Green Bay game. They won that game because of the defensive line and the disruption they were able to generate off of that. They lose Danico Autry. They lose a couple pieces of Justin Houston. They lose players on that front. Now you're wondering, is this team as solid as they were last year? They've got an injury-prone secondary. I don't know if they even know who they are. So to chalk that one up as an immediate loss to a team that just added a lot of players and added some quality depth, but young guys with upside, that can surprise you. I mean, I say this, I trash talk the Jets on social media because I'm obligated to. Okay? I have to. I got to do it. I got to defend the brand. But you could. It's our thing. It's what we do. Ask Scott Mason. That's why he does the AFC's Roundup podcast with us every week during the season, and he just comes on here and takes a beating. At least last year he did. He was like a WWF jobber who just comes in to get beat up and take the loss. But you guys are on the upswing. You've added talent. You've got young pieces. Look at Tre'Davious White. He was picked 27th overall, and he's an all-pro cornerback. You don't know if some of these young pieces you guys have added could pay dividends bigger than what you're expecting, especially under a defensive-minded head coach like Robert Saleh. So in that way, that game, again, I think is one place where you guys are selling yourself short. That Indy game could be a lot closer than you guys give it credit for.
I think it's easily the worst division in football. I know everyone bashes on the NFC East, and rightfully so, but man, the AFC South stinks this year. One of them's going to win 10 or 11 games more because the other two teams are bottom feeders with Jacksonville and Houston. Jacksonville may be a 7-win team, but they're still not going to be fantastic. But I tend to agree with Clay. I think Thursday night football just gives me the feeling that they're going to edge us out in Indy. We then move to 2 divisional games, and the first one against your Buffalo Bills, Drew, in MetLife Stadium. Josh Allen, not against Sam Darnold anymore. That storyline is buried, but against Zach Wilson, number 2 pick overall. I think Buffalo's going to sweep us this year. I think we may split against Miami, but I think we're going to have some trouble in division. Drew, I'm guessing you're going to go Buffalo.
Oh, I mean, here's the thing. I go back in my head to that 2019 week 1. You guys have us on the ropes. We haven't scored a single point in the football game yet, and it's going into the 4th quarter. And Josh Allen, according to former Bills linebacker Lorenzo Alexander, he tells the story that he went over to Josh after he throws a pick. Now, this is the 4th quarter of a game that you haven't scored in yet. And you're just like, okay. He goes, I got to go settle my young quarterback down. And he went over to talk to Josh about it, and Josh winked at him and goes, nah, baby, I got this. I got this. Don't worry, you'll see. And we come back and we win that football game. And from that point forward, he had the Jets number. Like, it was like he figured it out. And since then, the Jets haven't been able to touch him.
I want to say, was it that Josh Allen figured it out, or was it that we lost C.J. Mosley?
Well, I'll say this. Losing C.J. Mosley definitely sucked. And I think that last year, what you guys saw with him opting out like that, this is the consequence of overpaying a linebacker. He sucked away resources that your team desperately could have used in other places. I mean, that's a massive contract to give to a linebacker like that. And so, I mean, the Bills are on the cusp of doing it. We somehow dodged that bullet with Matt Milano, but Trey Edmonds is a 2-time Pro Bowler. He might cost us that kind of money. And there's going to be a real decision that the Bills have to make. C.J. Mosley, you guys brought him in not even knowing if he would truly fit the defensive system. And so when he exited, yes, that's unfortunate. But he hasn't. I mean, he has what does he have? 3 games with the Jets to his credit, maybe even 2.
6 quarters.
Yeah. So that's my point. I think that if anything, C.J. Mosley is a referendum on why overpaying certain positions is a bad precedent to set. This past year, I had to chug a Seagram's wine cooler in the middle of the first game, week 1, because my producer. I was like, "There's no way Josh will throw for 300 yards." A, it's the Jets. B, Bills quarterbacks don't do that. He set that bar. The second game, you guys played him tough, but our team was just so much better than yours that we kept finding ways to get into field goal range, and our kicker won the game for us. I think he had 6 field goals.
Oh, yeah.
So with that in mind, knowing that we can beat you with just a kicker, even when our quarterback has been completely neutralized by your defense, that gives this entire team a level of confidence entering that one that I really think is going to be hard for you guys to shake.
Yeah, Clay, I don't like the Jets in this one. What about yourself?
I think it's probably 34-13 Jets, if I had to put a number on it.
Jets?
No, I think the Bills, they do have our number. They actually played them close, so I don't think it'll be like a huge blowout. But I do like the Bills. And unfortunately, I gotta give them the win. Sorry, Luke. But and then did we get into the Dolphins one? Or are we going to that one?
Not yet. For those keeping tabs at home, the Jets are 0-3 in their division, so that's a fantastic start to the Zach Wilson era. That's through 9 games. The Jets are currently 4-5 according to our estimations. I'm going to give them our first divisional win here. I think Miami is a good team. It's a team on the upswing, probably a year further than the Jets. But I like our chances, removed of Adam Gase, to beat them at MetLife Stadium. I think we match up well with Tua. You got to force him to play that short intermediate game. We have a really good front 7 and linebacking and safety core. I don't know if he's going to trouble us outside the numbers, a little like Zach Wilson in that regard. They have a good defense. Robert Saleh, sorry. Brian Flores is a good defensive coach. I think it's a low-scoring game. I think it's like a 20-17 win for the Jets, Clay.
Man, I'm not liking how much we're agreeing right now. Yeah, this is my first time doing the win-loss thing today, and I agree. I think they're going to get their first divisional win, and maybe their only divisional win in Week 11 against the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins, like we mentioned earlier, they were 10-6, but they weren't a great 10-6 team. They had a couple blowouts, and just that's what made them seem better. I feel like I think they can beat them. I'm still not sold on Tua. I know, Drew, you're a Bama fan, but I'm still not entirely sold on him. I wasn't a huge fan of his game as a prospect, I should say. As a prospect, I wasn't a huge fan, but I just don't know if he can take that step that the Dolphins are expecting. But they still have a really good defense. Their cornerbacks they might have the best duo in the league with Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. I know they added some weapons to the outside for Tua. They have Mike Gesicki, who, oh man, he gave us a ton of trouble last year, just like every other tight end. But I think we still match up with them pretty well, and I think they're going to be able to take this one. I'm on the fence, but I think they'll take this one, especially because.
Okay,
where are you at?
It's been hurting me holding this in while you guys were talking, because you're being very nice to the Miami Dolphins. You're being very nice to the Dolphins, and I don't understand why. Let me paint a different picture for you. So the Kansas City Chiefs spot the Dolphins 21 points, I think it was, off multiple turnovers, and ultimately the Dolphins lose that game at home 33-27. Because when Kansas City needed to make plays, they made plays. They go on to play a listless Patriots team in Week 15 that knows it has nothing left to play for. They've got Cam Newton, who at this point is just a punching bag, trying to. They realize the quarterback option doesn't work anymore. Like, that was the Patriots' best play last year, inside of 7 yards or less to the end zone. It was just run Cam Newton because they didn't trust him to throw the ball. So they beat him. They beat them 22-12. They go on to beat the Raiders. When you think about this 10 and whatever schedule, so they lose to Kansas City. They beat the Patriots, who have punted on this season already. They beat the Raiders in a game that they should have lost. Any quality coach would have come away from that game for the Raiders with a win, but John Gruden, because he's John Gruden, found a way to screw that up and had no answer for it after the game. So now they're and again, another game where in crunch time, Tua had to get pulled. Right? Another game where your rookie quarterback has to get pulled off for an old man with a beard. The Amish rifle has to come off the bench and save the day again. Like, at some point, like, this is crunch time for your franchise. This is where your young quarterback should be taking the reins and leading your team to victory. And instead, he's watching as somebody else goes out and does it inexplicably. So then they roll into Buffalo with the league's #1 scoring defense. #1 in the NFL. And everyone goes, well, the Bills have nothing to play for. They're going to rest their starters at some point. Miami should win this game. Before halftime, the Bills score 26 points. And then they bench their starters. And Matt Barkley comes out of the tunnel with Antonio Williams, some guy that even Bills fans had never heard of, starting at tailback. And that offense goes on to hang another 26 points on the Dolphins. And their fantastic, amazing defense and this awesome job that their coach has done. And Chris Gier, their GM, is a genius, and he's assembled all this defensive talent. And you got punched in the mouth. That beating was so bad that they went from #1, not to #2, not to #3, but all the way to #4 because of one game. And you watched a team quit on its coach. They quit on him. Now, the question is, can you fix that in a single offseason? They shipped out Shaq Lawson. They inexplicably cut Kyle Van Noy after he signed a 4-year deal there. There's problems brewing inside that. Like, that's the thing. That's not the sign of a functional franchise. I don't care what you say. You signed a guy long-term who's friends with the head coach. That's why he's there. He's the coach's guy. And now he's gone? You sign a guy to a 3-year, $13 million a year deal, And then he's inexplicably shipped out of town for an old Bernardrick McKinney. I think he's like 35 playing linebacker. That doesn't make any sense. This Dolphins team is this enigma that I think gets a lot more credit than it actually deserves. I would love nothing more than to see you guys just whoop up on it. just take them. If you could win by 10, it would be the greatest thing the greatest thing I saw all season.
You said it. One of the first things you said when you hopped on here is that you learned not to get too high because you didn't want to get taken down too far. I think I'm going to speak for myself. I think I can speak for Luke. I feel like that's the route we're taking too. We don't want to get too high, and that's why we're trying to make the Dolphins sound better because we don't want to look that much worse if and when the Jets lose because that just happens. That's what we're just accustomed to as Jets fans.
I'll tell you, as a guy who watched a football team that literally missed the playoff for almost 2 decades, that sucked. And I know what that feeling that you guys have is. But what you have to understand is that this division is being reshaped as we speak. Yeah. Like right now, the Buffalo Bills were on top last year. Okay, they swept the division. But beyond that, there's a lot that's up for grabs there because Miami seems like they tried to they did that thing that they tried to fast track their growth. They spent a lot of money. They spent a lot of draft capital. Is that going to pan out though? Because most draft picks don't. I mean, I think, was it Peter King? There was somebody out there who had the stat that at least 53% of all first-round draft picks aren't on the team in their upcoming free agency cycle. They leave. Whether because they busted, whether because they were too good and the team couldn't afford them, it doesn't matter. The reality is that not all drafts, like you draft a haul of players, that doesn't mean they're all going to be good for you. The same way you go out and got 2 free agents and all of a sudden they're not on good free agents, quality free agents, and they're not on the Miami roster anymore because of the decisions of the coaching staff and GM. I just don't know what they're building. They're trying to do things that boost the confidence of this young quarterback. But if you're trying to build a house on sand, this whole thing could easily fall apart. This game, Miami against the Jets, could be the start of it.
So the Jets are 5-5, and I am going to do something that I can't actually believe. They play Houston and Philadelphia, so they're at Houston and then against Philadelphia at MetLife. The Jets are 7-5 right now for me. I don't know how we got here. I really don't know. I stumbled on 7-5 somehow. But Houston is a disheveled franchise. They brought in a head coach to be the punching bag for 1 season. I don't think David Culley's going to get much more than that, which is no knock on him as a coach. But pulling someone out of the obscurity as a wide receiver coach from Baltimore, Deshaun Watson, that whole scandal. So I see us beating them. And then Philly. This is the season we beat Philadelphia. Not once in franchise history have the Jets beaten the Eagles. We were 3-1 a few years ago in 2015 with Fitzpatrick heading into Philadelphia at MetLife Stadium, and we got blown up. We got destroyed. I think Darren Sproles somehow had 2 touchdowns that day. This is I'm saying 7-5 the Jets. Where are you, Clay? I don't know how I got here.
We're agreeing too much. I mean, honestly, the Texans they might be just the worst team, especially if Deshaun Watson isn't on the field. So I have to give the Jets the win in that one. And I don't really want to dive too deep into the Texans game. I just think the Jets are a better team, and the Texans suck. And I'm sorry. Going on to the Eagles, I think it will be a tougher game. The Eagles are not a good team either, and I'm not going to give them any credit like we were trying to do with Dolphins. They're a good team, and I think this is the year. 2020 and 2021 are weird years. This is the year that weird things happen. The Jets getting their first win against the Philadelphia Eagles is weird enough where I think it will happen. And I think the Jets are just, honestly, I think they're just a more talented team than the Eagles. It's weird saying that because they just won a Super Bowl 3 years ago, but I don't believe in Jalen Hurts. I like the guy. Really nice guy, but I just don't think he's an NFL quarterback. And I think Robert Saleh is he's really just going to dominate in that game.
Drew, cover your ears because Alabama quarterbacks are getting a hiding in the podcast today. Sorry about that.
I'll tell you this: Alabama quarterbacks suck in the NFL. That's a fact. I mean, with Terry Bradshaw, No, not Terry Bradshaw. Joe Namath. Joe Namath is probably the last one who actually made an impact in the NFL. The rest of them just kind of exist. They float around the league. They're in the ether, but none of them matter. It's hilarious to me that Tua, Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts, like this is the Alabama quarterback renaissance, and they're all the same flavor of mediocre. It's like vanilla ice cream. But like, hey, this brand of vanilla ice cream has real vanilla bean in it, so it might be slightly better than mediocre. When I take a look at the Eagles roster, Travis Fulgham, who was good, I mean, if you're a fantasy football player, he did some nice things for people. Jalen Reagor, I mean, people loved his upside, but there again, that's the nature of the draft. People fall in love. Oh, this guy, he could be this universal player for you, a satellite weapon. How often does that work? They got Devonta Smith, another Alabama guy who I love. I think he's the guy who made me understand just how fast Lamar Jackson is. I never understood why Lamar Jackson was so effective because I go, this guy can't throw worth a damn. He's awful as a quarterback throwing to wide receivers. Why is it that no one can tackle him in the open field if you know he's going to do it? And then I watched Devonta Smith play and I go, oh, when you're that fast, just no one can get the angle. It's just all about tackling. And I mean, me playing football, I played line. I was never in space. I was rarely ever out in space trying to break down and make a tackle. Watching people just whiff game after game after game on Devonta Smith and watch him rattle off all of this stuff, it was incredible to me. And so with that, like he's one weapon, and outside of that, there's nothing there that can hurt you. I mean, Miles Sanders, I feel like I'm helping pump up the Jets, but I'm more just tearing down your opponents because I don't have a whole lot of respect for this. I mean, they've got the line that allowed their previous quarterback to get murdered that they didn't really do much to fix. They've got a bad skill position group. I don't know what this team is. They've got Zach Ertz for whatever that's worth. I mean, the Bills tried to trade for him and their GM overplayed his hand. So now they're stuck with an old tight end who he's good, and one wide receiver who might be a star, but you don't know because the learning curve for rookie wide receivers is so high. I'm shocked to hear that you guys never – my eyes were like dinner plates when I heard that you've never beat them in franchise history. Never?
Wild. I can't believe it, right? Never beaten Philadelphia.
Then I'm willing to – you know what? I'll toast to you guys, a little bit of whiskey on the rocks. You guys are going to beat them this year just by default to the fact that I don't care how good you are, they're that bad.
Excellent. I love it. So the Jets are 7-5. Clay, I touched on at the start of the show how I'm not huge on New Orleans this year, but I'm not doing that. They're going to lose in New Orleans. Really tough to play in the Superdome or the Mercedes-Benz, whatever they're calling the arena over there now. But playing indoor, loud crowd, I'm assuming the crowds will be bigger at that stage. I see them losing the next two against New Orleans and then against Miami, who we already touched on. But I think at Hard Rock, that'll be a difficult game.
Yeah, I think we got to – actually, no, we played the Saints at home. We got them at MetLife. But
really?
I still think they lose the game. And the Saints, I mentioned, their defense is just – I think their defense is still really good. Yeah, they lost Trey Hendrickson, who had double-digit sacks, but he was kind of more just like – he was picking up scraps more often than not. They still have guys that can get to the quarterback. Cam Jordan, Onyemata, he's an underrated D tackle. Marcus Davenport, he was getting better last year. They just drafted Peyton Turner. We'll see what he is. And then they got one of my favorite players. He was one of my favorite Jets when he was on the team, Demario Davis. And he's been an absolute stud since joining the Saints. And I just don't know if we can move the ball too much on that defense. I think I could be overcrediting their defense a little bit, but I think they are a pretty good team, and I think they'll walk into New York and take the win. But the last time they came to New York, it was in 2013. I went to the game with my friend who's a diehard Saints fan, and this was Geno Smith's rookie year. The Saints were obviously flying high. Like they were the Saints still, and the Jets were I think pretty big underdogs, and I had no reason to believe they were going to win that game, and they actually won the game because the Saints and Sean Payton decided to do a tight end reverse with Josh Hill on 4th and 2, and we stopped them and won the game. So I'm not going to rule it out. They could still do it. The Jets are, I think they're more talented than they were in 2013, at least on paper. And the Saints, they lost Drew Brees, but they also lost Josh Hill, so they can't do the reverse to keep us in the game.
Drew, you haven't liked many teams yet. What do the Saints do for you?
The Saints are one of those teams that to your point, the Saints, to me, I've been a detractor of theirs for decades, but it's mostly because of their GM and the way that he's been able to I love analogies. I'm a man of colorful analogies. So he is essentially when you think of Inspector Gadget, okay, he's Dr. Claw, and the NFL salary cap is Inspector Gadget. The salary cap has been threatening to catch him for decades, and he's just been escaping it every year. Like, I got away with one, and I'm going to re-engineer some contracts, and I'll come back next year and field a competitive team. And it finally bit them in the ass this year when they had to bite the bullet because of the falling salary cap and the fact that they were $100 and something million over the cap. They had to hemorrhage talent. They had to. They didn't have a choice. So they pared down that roster in a lot of different places that I think it's going to be hard for them to find the depth that they once had. And I think that later in the season, the Bills play them on Thanksgiving. You guys play them week 14. I think by that point, their quarterback situation is going to be figured out in terms of whether it's Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston's the guy who he's very turnover prone. Taysom Hill worked for a week or two, but I don't know if in an elongated stretch he's an answer at quarterback. So with that in mind, I don't like the New Orleans team as they're currently constructed. I don't think they're as good as these prognosticators are making them think, but they have a very good head coach. And they do have guys. You know, they've got Peyton Turner, they've got who as a rookie should do very well in the NFL. They've got Cam Jordan, who's he's one of those guys that flirts with like, is he going to be, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer, but he's in the conversation of guys who will go down as the most consistent of their era. Mm-hmm. They've got some talent. They've got things to work with. It's just whether or not any of them work in concert together. Because if they don't, then that team is a disaster. That team is a wreck. And by the time that the season was winding down to week 14, they might not have much left to play for.
That's true. Let's give it to the Saints reluctantly. 7-6, the Jets. They're playing meaningful games in December. Todd Bowles would be proud. We now have the Dolphins. We've already touched on them. Clay, I'm giving it a loss. Are you going with me there?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a loss.
Okay, so we're 7-7 now, heading into the last 3 weeks of the season. And this, from a scheduling perspective, was my least favorite game on the Jets schedule. Having Trevor Lawrence versus Zach Wilson, number 1 in the draft versus number 2 in week 16 was such a waste to me. In all reality, you're probably going to have the Jets and the Jaguars both out of contention. Then some of the hype will have died down. I wish this game was earlier in the season. But in saying that, I still like the Jets here. They're two similar rosters. I think the Jets have more offensive talent, especially at the skill positions, may even have a better offensive line, depending on how Cam Robinson and some of those guys play for Jacksonville this year. So I'm taking the Jets here. But were you a little disappointed to see that game so late on the slate, Clay?
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed. I was hoping to see them week 1 or 2 with Carolina, with week 1 and 2. But, I mean, it's a Christmas weekend, so, I mean, I guess it could be worse. And you say that the Jets and Jags should be out of the race by here. We have them at 7-7 going into week 16. I mean, they're still in contention for a playoff spot if this is the scenario, more likely than not. And if they win, like we both think they're going to win, they're 8-7, which means they potentially could get to 10-7. And that's honestly, I just want them to be competitive through my birthday, and I'm at the end of September. So if December and us be competitive, I'd be more than happy with it. I think that they are a better team than Jacksonville. Jacksonville, I didn't really love their draft, to be honest. After Trevor Lawrence, like you draft Travis Etienne, and you immediately say he's your third down back. What is the issue? Like how does that happen? Like you just brought in James Robinson as a UDFA last year, and he was top 5 in rushing. Why are you drafting a running back in the first round in the first place? Like I understand they wanted Kadarius Toney, that was their guy, and the Giants traded back and they drafted him at 20. But why go Travis Etienne? Like honestly, they might have been able to get him at 33. Like, why not try to go somewhere else at 25 and try to, I don't know, help the team actually be better rather than hit on the one position that they're actually pretty decent at with James Robinson and Carlos Hyde, even though neither of them bring like that dynamic speed that ETN brings. Like, he's a completely different player, but I just didn't understand that. And then going Walker Little, I didn't like what Jackson was doing. And honestly, yeah, I'm a Gier fan. Yeah, Urban Meyer did some great things with Florida. I don't think he's going to be a great NFL head coach, and I'm not buying where they're going. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence could potentially take them places, but I'm taking the Jets here. We're going 8-7.
I think their offense, their off-season stunk. I think they made some terrible decisions. Drew, what did you think about Urban Meyer in Jacksonville and then their draft after Trevor Lawrence?
Urban Meyer started the free agent period by crying about the process and how it was hard. He said, hey, free agency was difficult, and I don't understand why. That sounds like an old man yelling at a cloud. Listen, man, this is what it is. And no one has any pity for you. There's no sympathy here. I think Buddy Nix had one of my favorite quotes Buddy Nix, former Buffalo Bills GM. He wasn't great, but he had one of my favorite quotes, which is, I'm not going to stand up here in front of you people, because he was talking to the media. He goes, I'm not going to complain to you because you don't care. He goes, same way I don't complain to my wife. She doesn't want to hear it. He goes, I'll complain to my wife. She doesn't want to hear it either. Nobody wants to hear me complain about the things that are hard about pro football because it's a game, and nobody wants to hear that. In that way, Urban Meyer, you dropped the ball here. And then you go into this draft, and the Bills float this narrative that, hey, we're going to trade up for ETN if we can. So they pull the trigger early, to your point, Clay. Like, you're wondering why they did it. The Bills, it was being floated out there that the Bills were working teams to see if they could trade up and land themselves Travis Etienne, knowing kind of in the back of their head that, like, he wanted to join those two players. And it's almost like they forced Urban's hand. And that's a weird thing. Like, you got not only in free agency, but also in the draft. Like, this is just one of those things I think has disaster written all over it. Like, I don't like Urban Meyer. I don't think ever since he ran away from the SEC, he ran away from the SEC because it was too tough. And then he shows up in the Big Ten. He goes, wow, this is better. I feel better. I'm not sick anymore. I think I can come back and coach. And he still doesn't win anything because he's not that good. So I don't know what he expects to accomplish here at the NFL level, but I think that's a mess.
Actually, just want to bring up. Sorry, Luke. I just want to bring up one thing before we move on to the next couple games. We're missing one huge headline here. This is the revenge game of Tim Tebow.
The fact that whole narrative even exists is further proof that Urban Meyer is in over his head. He's lost. And then Pro Football Talk, the headline today. Well, Urban Meyer says he's got a real decision to make with his tight end group this season. No, you don't. You've already made your decision. Yeah. You're that dumb.
Theme of today's podcast, Drew does not like your football team. That's what we're getting out of it today. Run that headline. We play like a Jet live.
Well, I'll say this. Our brand is the pettiest, hardest drinking Bills podcast that exists. I think I've represented both of those things well. But the reality is that I study the game of football out of just mania because I feel like if I can make it make sense over decades of losing, I had to find a way to make it make sense. And then we one day turned it into a podcast, and then our team started to get good. And I was like, oh, this is how good teams are built. These are the mistakes bad teams make. And when I see them, I don't pull punches because I don't have to. I don't get paid for this, so it doesn't matter.
That is fair. So I'm going to cut us off a little here, guys, because we're running a little long. But The Jets are going to finish with 2 losses to end the year. They're not going to beat the defending Super Bowl champions, Tampa Bay. I think that's going to be a loss, even though we play them in MetLife. And then they're going to lose to the Bills away. That's going to be a difficult game. I think that could be a blowout. The Jets not playing for a lot there. Maybe 9-8 gets them in the playoffs, but I don't think the Jets win either of those games.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'll let Drew finish it off. I think they'd go 8-9 to finish, and honestly, that's more than I can ask for. I'm not expecting them to get into playoff consideration in 2021. I think that's more into 2022. I just want to see progression. I want to see a quality team week in and week out where we just did not see that at any point last season. They didn't look competent. I want to see a competent football team week in and week out. And I think at 8-9, you get that. And that's all I can ask for as a Jets fan.